Bioware is currently facing what might very well be their last stand. Because if you look at the state of the studio right now, the next Mass Effect is being built by a team of fewer than 100 developers. For a massive galaxy-spanning AAA sci-fi RPG franchise, that does sound pretty rough, doesn't it? To put it into perspective, we've seen a big shift in how these big studios operate. Just last year, Sandfall Interactive put out Expedition 33 with a team of only 30 people, albeit with lots of outsourcing. Still, it completely blew everyone away. The big man himself, Michael Gambel, the project director for the next Mass Effect, actually tweeted out his congratulations to them, saying their success is proof that small and agile teams can deliver. It's a nice gesture, sure, but it does also sound like a justification of the downsizing that has been happening behind the scenes at Bioware these past few years. Because the reality is that the studio has been bleeding for years. Back in August 2023, EA laid off around 50 people from Bioware, including some of the veteran writers who built the foundation for both Dragon Age and Mass Effect. Then, early last year in 2025, they cut another 24 staff members in a corporate restructuring. And these downsizing moves are the direct result of some pretty horrible track record. Anthem, as you may know, completely dropped the ball and never recovered. Mass Effect Andromeda was an absolute disaster at launch, and according to EA's own investor calls, Dragon Age the Veilguard was internally tracking as a very big financial disappointment after missing its key targets. Now, if we look back at the development of the Veilguard, back when it was still being called Dreadwolf, let's just say that the development was messy. Bloomberg and Kotaku exposed years of internal indecision, high staff turnover, and huge creative shifts. And at one point, EA executives were forcing the team to turn it into a live service game to chase that Destiny money. And during that entire mess, their creative leaders just walked out the door. Creative director Mike Laidlaw, lead writer David Gator, and executive producer Mark Dara all left the project, though Dara did eventually come back later as a consultant just to help push the game over the finish line. And when the game was finally revealed in mid-2024, the reception was already incredibly mixed. Instead of a dark, gritty political intrigue that the Dragon Age franchise was known for, we got something that felt overly stylized, colorful, and more like a superhero spin-off than a mature fantasy epic. And most of you know that the launch discourse was a complete dumpster fire. And the game ultimately became a cautionary tale of what happens when a project loses its identity halfway through development. Now, the weight of saving this once legendary studio falls squarely on the shoulders of the Mass Effect team. But with under 100 people left to pull off a miracle, this begs the question, is a smaller, leaner team exactly what Bioware needs to cut the fat and find its own identity again? Or are we just watching the slow-motion funeral of one of the greatest Western studios to ever exist? But before we start digging a grave for this beloved franchise that we all love so much, let's actually take a look at what this skeleton crew has been building. Because over the last few years, Bioware haven't exactly been quiet. You see, Michael Gambel and the team has been dropping a long breadcrumb trail of teases, and it paints a pretty interesting picture of where the story might be heading. Starting all the way back in December 2020 at the Game Awards, the first teaser trailer was packed with actual clues about the timeline. We saw a destroyed mass relay floating in space debris, and of course our favorite Blueberry Liara T'Soni climbing around on a dead, snow-covered Reaper. And this already firmly planted the game in a post-Reaper War Milky Way galaxy. No, don't even try to argue that it's set in Andromeda. It isn't. But there was also that opening shot panning between two galaxies and an audio cue of someone saying Godspeed, the exact phrase used when the Tempest took off in Mass Effect Andromeda. Michael Gambel later took to Twitter to confirm these details were entirely intentional. So they actively want us to think about both galaxies. I wonder why. But then came N7 Day 2021 and we got that cool official poster of an impact crater, and if you zoom out, the entire impact crater here is shaped exactly like a Geth head. Zoom in and the crater is littered with the bodies of both Geth and Quarians, pointing to some kind of renewed conflict maybe. And down at the bottom, there's a 4-person squad walking toward the wreckage. One of them is a Krogan rocking red battle armor, heavily implying that it's either Rex or possibly Grunt wearing his colors. Of this one, I am pretty sure. Now this team is also walking away from a white ship marked with the letters SFX, and for you die-hard fans like me, you know that stands for Science Fiction X, the original working title for the very first Mass Effect game. A pretty huge hint that points to them wanting to go back to their roots, I think. Now fast forward to N7 Day 2022 and we got a corrupted video file showing a new, very different looking mass relay under construction, and the community eventually decoded some garbled audio hidden into the footage, and it turned out to be Liara secretly communicating with a Geth.
I can see it. How did we miss this? Exactly. The Council will be furious.
Next, we have N7 Day 2023. Bioware released an actual in-game clip of a mysterious character in a trench coat walking through a dark corridor. But the accompanying poster is where things get really interesting, because inside the coat we can see a bar, and if you zoom in you can clearly see a Geth hanging out next to an Asari. And right next to them, an Angara. Exactly, that native race from the Andromeda Galaxy, having what looks like an intense chat with what is most likely Liara T'Soni. And this, well, I think this is the smoking gun. Whatever Michael Gamble's team is cooking up, it would seem that it is a direct sequel to both Mass Effect 3 and Mass Effect Andromeda. Now the latest teaser was from N7 Day 2025, where we got a new image of a Krogan battlemaster leading an army with the bold letters Civil War right below it, suggesting that the Milky Way galaxy is far from peaceful. The timelines and the galaxies are somehow converging. So we know the story is trying to bridge these huge-ass gaps, but what about the game itself? How is it actually being built? Well, for starters, Bioware has finally performed a much-needed exorcism on the Frostbite engine. If you remember the development nightmares behind Anthem and Andromeda, you know that Bioware's use of Frostbite, an engine built for first-person shooters like Battlefield, was a pretty big mistake. It's exactly why Andromeda had those infamous facial animations at launch, because the engine was literally fighting the developers every step of the way when trying to build an RPG from the ground up. But for the next Mass Effect, they seem to have moved to Unreal Engine 5. And for many of you, this is a huge sigh of relief. It solves a mountain of technical pipelines right out the gate, it would seem. Michael Gamble even teased this a while back, replying to an Epic Games developer with a picture of a Salarian face, heavily hinting that they are actively experimenting with UE5's metahuman technology to nail those, complex alien facial animations. That said, Unreal Engine 5 has had a slew of issues these past few years, so it's really anyone's guess as to how successful they've been during development so far. And a shiny new engine doesn't necessarily mean much without the right people to use it. But despite the layoffs we talked about earlier, the core roster leading this game right now is a pretty strong lineup of developers. You see, Michael managed to bring back some heavy-hitting veterans from the original trilogy to steady the ship. First of all, we have Derek Watts, the original art director, returning to make sure the game actually looks and feels like the classic Mass Effect. There is Parrish Lay, the original cinematic director, who's back to handle the high-stakes cinematography. Then we have Dusty Everman, the guy who originally brought the Normandy SR-1 back to life, who is now the principal narrative designer. And Brandon Holmes, a veteran programmer from the trilogy days, has stepped in as producer. But thankfully, they're not simply relying on nostalgia here, because they've actually brought in some fresh new blood. Mary DeMarle joined the team as the senior narrative director a few years ago, and if you don't know her work, well, she was the lead writer for Deus Ex Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, and she took home the Best Narrative Award for the Guardians of the Galaxy game back in 2021. And well, having someone with her pedigree in charge of the overarching story and choice-driven narrative is an admittedly big win, I think. They also brought on Michael Tucker, the writer behind the YouTube channel Lessons from the Screenplay, to help with the game, so as far as we can see, the engine switch seems smart, and the right people seem to be in the room. However, they are still walking into one of the biggest traps of writing in video game history. the Mass Effect 3 ending. You see, depending on the choices you made back in 2012, or your 20th playthrough of the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, the Milky Way galaxy ends in wildly different states. We have a red state, a blue state, or a green state, otherwise known as destroy, control, and synthesis. The biggest issue we have here is, how do you even begin to canonize a sequel without alienating a huge chunk of the player base? Do they just pick a canon ending? Do they try to merge them? Or will they try some sort of timeline trickery to just skip the entire thing? Whatever decision they make here, somebody is definitely going to be pissed. And speaking of pissing people off, we also have other things to consider, like will they bring Shepard back? What other events and choices will they canonize? Did any of our beloved companions make it? Choices, choices, choices. Alright, now if you were simply looking for the most up-to-date information about the next Mass Effect, then you can stop here, because I'm about to go off script. Now, as many of you guys know on this channel, I am a very big Mass Effect fan. Most of you watching are definitely Mass Effect fans probably since 2012, and if you aren't, then you're a big Mass Effect fan since the Legendary Edition. A lot of this channel has been built upon the Mass Effect brand, you know, talking about the various scenes, about the various companions, about the dialogue, about the storylines, and the future of Mass Effect and various theories and what could possibly happen and yada 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 yada. And I love talking about Mass Effect. I really do. It is one of the few franchises that I feel you can almost talk about forever because there's just so much to it. It's so rich. It's such a rich universe. And the thing is, when Mass Effect, or the next Mass Effect, was announced back in the day, I was super excited. You can still find my reaction, you know, when I'm tearing up, I'm losing it, you know, seeing the announcement of the next game in my favorite franchise of all time. And I still have that, let's call it passion. I still have that excitement buried somewhere deep inside. But I would say that, like a lot of you, I am a little hesitant on how excited I can let myself be. You might notice that from the tone of this video, of this informational breakdown, I guess you could say, because back in the day, I gotta admit, I was innocent. I was a little boy at heart. Today, I'm hardened. Today, I'm much more rough-edged. But honestly, I'm still excited for it. But there's so much that has been going on with Bioware, not only like with the Veilguard, but also with this acquisition of EA. In case you didn't know, EA has been acquired by the Saudi Arabian Consortium, or PIF, I think they're called for short, along with some other investors. And let's just say that a lot of people are understandably worried about what this means for Mass Effect as a franchise. What does this mean for storylines? What does this mean for the adult elements? Because we all know Mass Effect 1 to 3 are incredibly adult games. And so, you know, will this mean things like censorship? Will this mean, well, a lot of things? And it's understandably worrying. And I think a lot of the worries stem into this idea that it could possibly mean the end of the Mass Effect identity. And as I've said on this channel before, stepping too far away from a game's core identity often means you lose that audience, and often you don't replace it with a new, better audience, you just lose the one loyal one you have. And that is, I guess, one of my worries with the next Mass Effect, is how close will it actually stay to the type of energy, to the type of adult storytelling that Mass Effect has and hopefully will continue to be. I have to say that I am a little worried, of course. And then we have other things like, I mean, look at those things right back there on my shelf. And I'm not trying to sell Exodus here. That's not the point of this video, but we have games like Exodus. We have games like The Expanse, Osiris Reborn coming up, and they're coming up in, the next year. Next year, we're getting 2 games that are very similar and obviously inspired by Mass Effect. Even Exodus has several OG people from the good old Bioware back in the day that made the Mass Effect games and that, made the Dragon Age Origins and Knights of the Old Republic. So we have people who are working over at Exodus making a sci-fi RPG. And the question is, will the next Mass Effect be able to live up not only to the hype that people feel, the expectations that a lot of us fans have, and will it be able to measure up to these 2 giants that are releasing next year? That is the question, and it's my hope that it is. The thing is, it might sound like I'm cynical. I'm really trying not to be, but it's hard. It's difficult to be very optimistic about the next Mass Effect with everything we know that has happened. I guess we'll have to wait and see, and I'll obviously keep doing breakdowns, trailer breakdowns. I'll obviously keep updating you guys whenever we get something new, either throughout the year or on N7 Day. I love making the N7 Day breakdowns. But right now, we're just waiting for new information about the next game. And I really hope it's positive. I really, really do hope it's positive stuff, because I don't think I can take another bad news situation. At any rate, do let me know what you guys think about the next Mass Effect in the comments below. Are you still excited for it? Are you excited for the developers that are attached to it? What are your thoughts? As always, I'm very interested. Has the vibe shifted? Has it changed somewhat? Or are you guys as excited as you were back in the day? I know it's shifted quite a lot since, I've made a couple of these every now and then. But I'm still curious to what the vibe is right now and what the feeling is for you guys. At any rate, thank you so much for watching as always. And don't forget to subscribe for all your sci-fi RPG gaming. Mr. Alton, signing off.